I read 5 books in April and 1 audiobook. Hello and welcome to Omar Reads. I'm Omar. The first book that I read was The Power of Women by Dr Denis Mckwage. I think this is an essential read for everybody. It talks about violence against women around the world. He had an interest in helping women with difficult childbirth, but he ended up becoming a doctor who was helping women who were victims of sexual assault, sexual violence. He ends up creating a place for these women to come and shelter and recover. What I loved about this book is Dr. Denis Mckwage was able to put the women of these stories at the forefront of his storytelling. He didn't paint himself out to be the hero. I really admired that. I would recommend that you read the trigger warnings before you pick it up because it is a very heavy read. I highly recommend that you pick this up. It's such an essential reading. The next book that I picked up in April was The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. This was a book that was selected as part of my Fable book club, the Insufferable Readers Club. If you're not a part of it, please feel free to join. We read a lot of books about women. So what can I say about The Bell Jar? The Bell Jar is a classic piece of literature on women's mental health, and whilst I can appreciate that this is a story that was way ahead of its time in terms of how a woman can descend into madness, I do think that the racist elements of this book are really difficult to overlook. It is a powerful read in its depiction of mental health, but for me personally, I was really struggling with the racist element. There's a debate about, for its time, this is what was expected, but if we're being honest, even for the time that Sylvia Plath wrote this book, racism was not acceptable. This book is loosely based on Sylvia Plath's own life. I am glad that I read it because it is classic literature and it is a very well-renowned book. But would I recommend it? I don't think so. If you are looking for books that talk about women's mental health, there are some other books that are just as good, if not better, on this subject without the racism, and that includes The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. It talks about how a woman unravels after giving birth to her baby. It's about postnatal depression, and it also highlights how women were treated at that point in time based on their mental health and how bed rest was considered a cure that leads the protagonist in the story to fall deeper into depression. One of the other books that I would recommend is a recent publication. It was published last year. It's called Mad Wife. This is also a book about a woman's descent into madness. Think Desperate Housewives, but all about mental health. I loved it. I thought it was such an important read. It's about hysteria and how it was judged and how women were treated in terms of their mental health in the 50s. If you've not read that, I highly recommend that you pick that up. The next book that I read was On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. This is a book that I started way before April, but I took my sweet time with it. Once I start a book, I usually get through it fairly quickly, even though I'm a very slow reader. But with this book, I just wanted to take my time with it because the writing is very poetic and lyrical. It's not one to rush through. I love how the author was able to depict the immigrant experience. I don't think this book is for everybody, but if you have read it, let me know what you thought of it. I usually love listening to audiobooks, but I wouldn't recommend listening to this on audiobook because I think reading it yourself adds to the power and the impact of the words that are in this book. I love the dynamic between the protagonist and his mother in the book. He talks to his mother who's suffering in her own way, and he explains his experiences through a letter to his mother, and it's such a beautiful and heartbreaking narrative. The next book that I picked up was Seascraper by Benjamin Wood. I really liked it. It wasn't what I was expecting at all. This book is about possibilities, about what it means to follow your desires, your passions, and what life looks like when you just do what is expected of you. Briefly, in the book, we follow the protagonist, Thomas, who scrapes the sea for shrimp as part of a family-owned business, but he has a dream and a desire to do more than that. He loves music, he loves singing, and one day someone from Hollywood comes and sells him the dream of doing exactly that. This book really makes you question what the risks are between following our dreams and desires and our potential versus just doing what is expected of us and living in the box that society confines us to. The next book that I read in April was One Day Everyone Will Always Have Been Against This. This book forces you to confront your complicity in the ongoing Palestinian genocide. And far beyond that, it makes you understand what your complicity is in times of war, how history reshapes moral responsibility. I think it's such a powerful book. It reads more like a plea to you as a reader to think about your contribution to the ongoing genocide. It's a must read for everybody. It is an uncomfortable read. I think it's uncomfortable because of the questions that it raises for us as individuals. Though it is uncomfortable, I think it's absolutely necessary to read. All in all, my reading month of April wasn't a month for escapism. In fact, it was a month where I had to sit with really dark, disturbing stories. But all in all, it was really good. But Dr. Denis Mckwage does a fantastic job of making everybody understand how important this is for us all as a community, as a society, as humankind, and what we need to do about it. So this book was exceptional in that sense, made me consider what action we can take to help reduce sexual violence against women. This book was a book that made me confront issues of racism, how we read books. Alongside the actual subject matter of this book, which was mental health, this book actually made me sit with racism in literature and what that means for us as readers, and how do we distinguish between the books we choose to read and the books that we don't. I started reading The Goldfinch and I couldn't get past the first few pages because of the racist narrative, whereas with this one I read through it all and it really made me sit and question why I was able to do that with one and not the other. Seascraper, this was such a positive book to end the month on because it was all about possibility, all about dreams, all about following your desires and living a life for you and not for others. And then this book was about trauma, about identity, about the sacrifices that our mothers make for us on a day-to-day basis. Last but not least, One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This. This book forced me to confront my complicity in global politics. If you've read any of these books, let me know what you thought of them. Once again, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!